Well, round two is complete, and we are set for the regional finals. We'll break down how we all got here. Colorado Mines was able to hold off a surging Minnesota State team. Head coach Brandon Moore will join us today in the show. And the regional finals will be next week. We will look at them, predict them, analyze, and dissect them. With Chuck Bittner, Matt Wawicki, Chris Ferguson, Tony Nicolette, Justin Polizzi, and Devin Albertson, I am Brandon Meisner. Thank you for joining us on Inside D2 Football. So we had to suffer through a lackluster round one, but we were rewarded with some outstanding games yesterday, some of the best games that I can remember in the Division II playoffs. We could start almost anywhere. There were that many good games, but we'll start tonight's show with a strong Super Region 4. And Colorado Mines was down early, but regained the lead and held off Minnesota State 48-45 to win that game. This was one of the most outstanding games of the day.
Yeah, we weren't entirely sure how this one was going to go. Northern Sun plays a silo schedule. Mines hadn't played anybody, outside of conference for a while, and you can see a great shot there to kind of start off, the video as we see it. Mines gets going early, quick slant here, and all of a sudden Max McLeod's off to the races, and John Matoka, quarterback for Mines, is off to having a real big day, over 300 yards passing and 100 yards rushing, a total of 5 scores from Matoka today, or in the game. And then this is kind of a bubble screen gone wrong. Elijah McGee with the pick, and Matoka tries to take a handoff from him on the way past, and all of a sudden, this kind of flipped the game here for a while, Brandon. All of a sudden, we're looking at a situation where the Mavs are slowly looking like they're going to take some control early. They get themselves, up to a spot where we're looking at a 21-7 lead for Mankato at one point, and just a little bit surprising. And they do a flea flicker here and end up hitting DJ Barber for a long score. And it kind of felt like maybe Mines is on upset alert here. Just at this moment, Mankato, not really a high-flying squad like that, typically a little more ground and pound, but they were hitting the air quite a bit. But you notice 3rd and 19 here for Mines, and they're able to hit a ball right there to Josh Johnson for a huge catch and a really well-contested grab. And Mines is back in business. And, now we're looking here just before half, 30 seconds before half. Matoka steps up and hits Josh Johnson again right under the goalpost there for a score. And after all the hard work by Mankato, we're still looking at basically a new ball game come the second half. And I thought that was a tough deal for Mankato, because it looked like they were really going to be in a good spot by half. Now we're up to, a little later in the game. Mines is up 10. Mankato kind of struggled to move the ball for a while. Then they get behind the coverage here for a long score for Isaiah Emmanuel. And they get themselves just close enough, but they don't get the onside. And, Mines ends up outlasting him right there. I thought a few keys in the game, Brandon, where Mankato did a nice job with punt returns and kind of fueled them for a while early in the football game. But, Matoka just starts making some plays, and they ended up being, 8 of 17 on 3rd down. So they were able and converting on some longer ones, frankly, as well. His receivers battled for him all day. Zeman was kind of in and out of the lineup, dinged up, and he's been kind of dealing with that. But, it says a whole lot with regard to the resolve of this Mines team, with the way they were able to battle through what we saw there looked like a real bad threat in that first half.
We have talked a lot about Matoka this year, and we've talked about Mines' resiliency. And I think we saw, that I think we saw that from both of them yesterday, both Matoka individually and the team as a whole.
Absolutely.
And we'll talk about the Harlan Hill Trophy, because the list of candidates was released earlier this week. We'll talk about that list, but if I had a vote in that, I would vote John Matoka, because I think he's been the player of the year so far this year.
Absolutely. And, Brandon, you can look back. Obviously, Mines has had other guys who have won this award.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure he's not every bit as good as
Agreed.
they were, maybe better.
Agreed.
And some of this is also really, who are you battling for the award?
Yeah,
And
true.
I mean, Tyson Bagent's going to be a handful for anyone to take down, but I really think that Matoker's neck and neck there with him.
All right, Matt, we all know, because we talked about the great schedule to start the season, that Mines started the season 0-2, lost to Grand Valley, and then lost to Angelo State. Since then, they've won 11 straight, and now they've earned the right to play Angelo State for the regional finals. And their head coach is Brandon Moore, and Coach Moore joins us now. Coach, thank you very much for taking time out of your Sunday night, and thank you for being with us here on Inside D2 Football.
I appreciate you guys having me. Thanks.
Coach, you know what, you guys, we were kind of just taking a look at some of the video there. You guys get off to, you guys score right away. Quick, great call, by the way, 3rd and 3. You guys, they're expecting run. You guys are able to hit that quick slant for a score, and all of a sudden you're thinking, hey, we're off to a great start here. And then they get a near pick six, of course, on the bubble. Then they start getting some big plays in the punt return, and it's 21-7. What are your thoughts at that time? Because things really flipped in a hurry.
Well, it was, we started out throwing the ball to Max McLeod. Max makes a huge catch, a huge play in a good situation. I mean, John dealt the ball to him. He caught it and took it 60, 70 yards for a touchdown. I think that Angelo, skipping ahead on you. I'm sorry about that. But I think Mankato did an outstanding job in the special teams. They kicked our butt just in field position up and down the field throughout the day. There was a couple punt returns early that they capitalized on, getting the ball inside the 3-yard line. Then you saw the interception where number 7 took it all the way back inside the 10-yard line as well. Put us in a really, really bad spot in a real predicament, but our playmakers came to play, and John got hot, and we saw some success. I think that games like this are always going to happen, especially in the playoffs when you play good teams and you play non-conference teams that you're not used to playing. I know you guys alluded to that earlier, but once we caught our stride, especially offensively, I think we did an outstanding job.
Let me ask you, you made reference to Mankato there a moment ago. Were they who you thought they were? I mean, when you take a look, and you guys had to be watching film, of course, leading up to this. If you watch the first half of the season, they're one football team. Then the back half, they really started to come on strong when you watch the Sioux Falls, the Augustanas, and games like that. What were your thoughts when you guys got out there?
Well, they were not the team offensively that we expected. We expected them to come out and pound the ball, give it to those backs, and getting 12, 13, 14 personnel and run the football.
Right.
But their quarterback came out and had an exceptional day, 3-4 touchdowns, and did a number of things just to keep them in the game and to make everything go for them. So they weren't the team that we were expecting to come in. Defensively, they were, and our offensive coordinator Pete Sturbick was able to take advantage of some different things, but defensively they came out and shocked us, coming in 11 personnel and some 10 personnel and trying to spread the ball around a little bit.
Sure.
So you, with the exception of a late blown coverage, you were able to hold them out of the end zone in the second half. What did you guys do defensively that allowed you to stop them, or at least hold them in the second half?
Well, I think our defensive coordinator, Trip Thomas, made some great adjustments at halftime. We threw a package in there that we hadn't practiced all week, and just to put some more DBs on the field and give us a little bit better success just in the pass game.
So, we talked a couple times, and we've mentioned a couple times in this show and multiple times throughout the season that you guys had 2 tough games to start the year. You happened to fall in both of those games. Did that give your team a sense of urgency in terms of, your goals to make the playoffs, or how did those losses affect your team, or did they?
I think if anything, it brought our kids a little bit closer together. I think that they play to a certain standard. They have certain expectations of themselves, and we didn't meet those expectations in those first 2 games. Can't take anything away from Grand Valley or Angelo because they came out and played great games. Both those games went down to the wire. But we challenged ourselves this year to put ourselves in these adverse situations, to play a tougher non-conference schedule, maybe put ourselves in a better position when we went to the playoffs, or to see exactly how far our program has come.
Do you think you saw benefit from playing those two tough early games?
Absolutely. I think it was important that the two teams we lost to finished 1 and 2 in Division II
That's true.
for the year. I mean, that gave our players an enormous sense of pride, and I think after seeing how Grand Valley and seeing how Angelo finished the season, I think our players were confident in the way that they were going to be able to come out in the playoffs and compete.
Coach, you heard us mention a little bit earlier in the show that we're going to be taking a look at some Harlan Hill candidates. The list came out, 48 guys and so forth. We need to know from you, Coach, who would you pick to win the Harlan Hill Award? And you know what? Why is it John Matoka?
Well, John is an exceptional player. His ability to create anywhere on the field, in any instant, in any part of the game. He's a player who wants the ball in his hands. He wants to be the guy that's going to make it happen. And that's not indicative of every quarterback you play or every person who's at the forefront of their team. John, I think his leadership. He was voted a captain in his junior year. He probably should have been a captain last year as well. But I think just his leadership qualities, his leadership elements makes him the player he is. He's able to deal the ball all over the field. There isn't one player on the offense who isn't happy with the touches they get from week to week, and those guys have had a tremendous amount of success. I think his relationship with our offensive coordinator Pete Sturvik is what allows that to be so successful and to be so exciting for us.
You know what, Coach? I think that we had Michael Zeman on a year ago in the playoffs. Great guy, and he gets a lot of headlines, and obviously John Matoka does as well. I've thought for a little while that the unsung kind of stars on the team that don't get a lot of shine, they're wideouts Josh Johnson and Max McLeod. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, Josh will catch anything you throw near him.
Yes,
I think it's and he makes some really, really exciting catches, and he's the guy that John goes to when he needs to play and he needs to create something. And Max has been our big play guy all year. His stats are kind of unbelievable when you see his catches to touchdown ratio. Both 1,000-yard receivers on the year. And just his bookends have been tremendous for us throughout the year. But our two interior receivers, Mason Karp and Tristan Smith, have also been huge and been so important to our offensive success.
Sure.
Well, this week you've earned the right to play Angelo State in a rematch of a game played at your place earlier this year. How do you flip the script? How do you go on the road, and how do you beat the Rams?
Well, we're going to prepare like we do every other week. I think the travel component it's hard for anybody. So, I mean, it's just one of those things that we'll have to mitigate and fight through that adversity. We're going to approach the game plan fresh, look at it from fresh eyes, and try to put ourselves in a position to be successful.
Well, Coach, we wish you the best of luck against Angelo State, and we can't thank you enough for sharing part of your Sunday with us right here on Inside D2 Football. Thanks for joining us.
I appreciate you guys' time. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. That's Colorado School of Mines head coach Brandon Moore. And again, as you guys know, they will be traveling to Angelo State. We'll preview that game a little later in the show. That wasn't the only game that went on in Super Region 4. Unfortunately for you, the Northern Sun, no longer part of the playoffs, but
I don't like the way you put that.
We welcome you. We welcome you.
So, but in any case, a game, we moved to the great state of Texas where a close game became much less stressful for Angelo State in the fourth quarter as they were able to extend the lead and pull away for what afterwards looked like an easy victory over Bemidji State, eliminating
That's
the
fair.
Northern Sun from the playoffs.
That's fair.
Yeah.
In taking a look at this one here, I was concerned how this was going to go, Brandon, because it looked like there was a lot of rain that was happening before the game got going. And, with a pass happy team like Bemidji, I had a real concern. But, right out of the gate, they were able to hit, Bolio here in the corner, of course. Who else? And, he makes a heck of a grab. What ended up being their lone score of the day. For Bemidji, they just kind of struggled. They couldn't run the football. And then we had Angelo hitting the screen here to Amayabu. Just a real heavy runner. I mean, hard guy to stop. And you can kind of see, the challenges that Bemidji was going to have there. You see once again, they go to him for another score. And, once they got up two scores, I thought, okay, maybe Angelo's going to go take off and run in this one. Mm-hmm. This game ended up sitting at 13-7 for basically 2 full quarters.
Right.
And, all of a sudden late, when Angelo got up 2 scores, it kind of felt like Bemidji had a little too much to deal with. And then some picks started coming. And, Brandon all tried to make a few things happen. Route that was picked for 6 here. And, the game was essentially a 1-score game, with 9 minutes left. And Bemidji is marching. And they had a 4th and 1 play. And they end up going ahead. And at that point in time, they did 4th and 1, and they did a wildcat. And it's just not something I'm a huge fan of for them. And they ended up losing a yard in the process. And in doing so, that was kind of their chance. And then from there on, it was pretty much all Angelo. And they kind of ran away in the end. But, I mean, it was a 13-7 game with 9 minutes left. So it was a very competitive game. The score probably doesn't indicate that. But, Bemidji has nothing to be ashamed of.
Right. You look at it, as you said, all had a mediocre game for him. The 5 picks, most of them are in garbage time late. And I think all in all, Bemidji was not one of the top seeds. I think they held themselves and proved that they belong in the playoffs. But ultimately, we've thought Angelo State was one of the best teams in the country, and they kind of proved it in the way that game played out. All right.
Yep.
All right. Let's go ahead and switch to Super Region 3 now, guys. We had some outstanding games in that region. In the first top 10, there are 2 top 10 matchups in Super Region 3. But in the first one, the number 1 team in the land had a tougher than expected time against number 10 Northwest Missouri. Grand Valley ground out a 13-8 win to move on to the next round. Tony, you were there. Tell us what you saw.
Well, we saw what probably qualifies as a traditional GLIAC MIAA rock fight, slugfest. Right. Both teams really brought the physicality to this game. Trench warfare, really every inch that was gained was earned the hard way. And it was just basically 2 teams kind of standing in the middle of the ring, taking haymakers at each other. I think for me, the thing that stood out the most was we talked a lot about how both teams could defend the run really well, and both teams' secondaries seemed a little shaky. And despite, kind of the highlight you see there and maybe a few plays that got through, I actually thought both secondaries in general acquitted themselves relatively well. I mean, some of these completions by Hohensee were just absolute dimes into good coverage, and they're perfectly thrown balls that the receivers make a great play on. The flip side of that, even though he completed those passes, the Grand Valley still had 3 interceptions in this game, all by Nizier Forqueen. And so again, I thought that the secondaries actually probably played a little bit better than maybe the stats might indicate, and they acquitted themselves well. I think the other thing that stood out was we knew both teams could defend the run, but the only one that really did in this game was Grand Valley. I mean, they held Northwest to 53 yards rushing. Grand Valley was able to churn out 200 on the day, far and away the most successful rushing day that anybody's had against Northwest this year. But, again, both offenses actually did a fair amount of work in this game, and yet defenses rose to the challenge when need be. I mean, these were two teams that converted red zone opportunities at an alarming rate throughout the year.
Exactly.
They went combined 4 of 11 in this game. So
exactly.
It was a lot of, hey, you might move it into my red zone, but if you're going to score, I'm gonna have Dan Campbell bite your kneecaps if you're going in. So
that was my observation. If one team had been efficient in the red zone, they would have blown the other out in that game, right? Because there were stops and turnovers all the time in the red zone.
Yes, definitely. And, I mean, if you really look at the flow of play throughout the game, it sure seemed like both teams left some plays on the field. But Grand Valley really seemed to, particularly in the pass game in the first half, they had a couple of drives that they kind of stymied themselves a little bit more than maybe Northwest stopped them. I mean, there were some open receivers where connections just weren't getting made, whether it was, balls weren't quite on target or maybe a couple were dropped. So it felt like Grand Valley really could have had a bigger lead at halftime than 7-0. But hey, you got to give, I said last week, Northwest is the Terminator, man. I mean, until you do something about them and find a way to avoid a sequel, they're always around. So it was a great college football game. It really was. The wind actually kind of played a factor in there too. Whoever had it at their back had a little bit of an advantage, but it was just two elite programs playing a great ball game, great weather. And both teams just fought really hard, and Grand Valley, I think, figured out a way to outlast them. And you really saw the run game, particularly in the fourth quarter. Tariq Reed did a lot of damage in the fourth quarter, particularly getting to the edge. And so it just looked like Grand Valley's offensive line finally got a little bit of an advantage late. And the front seven for Northwest that had played beautifully to that point looked just a little bit tired as the game wore on, and that I kind of think probably proved to be advantage and what gave Grand Valley the ability to kind of close things out the way they did.
Well, I thought Cade Peterson, you mentioned the 200-yard rushing. A lot of that was Cade Peterson getting loose. He had
there was a fair amount of that. Yeah,
he had
42 on one play. Yeah, for sure.
And so that I thought that was a good job by him. And I would never make this comparison because nobody is Cullen Finnerty. But Cullen Finnerty had the ability, if he wasn't throwing it, to go find a way to win it with his legs, and he was tough. And there was a little bit of that. Again, I would never compare anybody to Cullen Finnerty, but I just did. So, nonetheless, it was I didn't expect a game like that, but that's the game we got, and Grand Valley moves on. So
most of us in the GLIAC, that's pretty much almost exactly what we expected.
Fair enough.
Just shoot straight.
Slugfest there. And it looks like, and I wasn't able to watch the game due to other stuff going on Saturday and then Flow Sports. I wasn't going to pay for it while doing other things, kind of deal for it, unfortunately. And, but it felt like Cade Peterson, based on what I was seeing there, was Northwest still had trouble with the GLIAC quarterbacks and the kind of running game and that version of it. Usually a good job versus the regular running game. It just whenever the quarterback kind of breaks stuff down, getting to the edge there, did a really good job with that. And just made more plays there at the end. That pass at the end of the game, they're down a score Grand Valley had really was just huge because it felt like Northwest when they went up 8-7. It's like they might actually get to pull this off somehow without scoring an offensive touchdown. This might actually happen, which had been wild. But Grand Valley made a play there late and was able to execute in the important moments to get a win.
All right. Yeah, guess what? There was another outstanding MIAA GLIAC game between two top 10 ranked teams. Pittsburgh State, number 4 in the country, missed a game-tying field goal at the end, and Ferris State was able to hold on to win 17-14. In spite of 5 turnovers, the Bulldogs move on, and they'll get a chance for revenge against Grand Valley. What did you make of this one, Tony?
Yeah, so, Pitt State missed a field goal late. They were real close to having punched that in. I mean, there's a nifty little shovel pass that got them inside the 10. So, I mean, it was real close to them actually taking a lead there in the last minute. But, this was an interesting game from the standpoint that, yes, Ferris did overcome 5 turnovers. again, I mean, we talk about this, I think often. There's a certain element of Ferris's style of play where they turn the ball over a little bit week to week, and sometimes it's more than others. Last week was none against Davenport. This week they had a handful of them, but they're a team that's got the athletes to overcome that. One of the things that struck me though was, Ferris came out blazing, scored on 2 of their first 3 possessions. They had 170 yards of their 387 total in the first quarter. And it was 14-0, and it just looked like they were just going to run all over Pitt State. And Pitt State gathered themselves and figured out how over the better part of those last 3 quarters to, I think they adjusted to the speed and kind of got adjusted to what their eyes were telling them and what their keys were telling them. And they actually played quite well defensively throughout the rest of the game. Now, again, Ferris helped them in some spots. But in general, after taking a haymaker in the first couple minutes of the fight like that, Pitt State's defense really did a whale of a job just kind of settling themselves and recovering from there. I think the thing that stood out to me the most, though, was Pitt State's offensive line just did not seem up to the challenge of what was going to be required in this game. I mean, Ferris had 9 sacks. Caleb Murphy had 6 on his own. Right. They just had no answer for what Ferris was going to do in terms of pressuring the passer. I think Pitt State averaged 1.1 yards per carry on the day. And you're just not going to beat Ferris if you can't physically do anything to them up front with your offensive line. And Pitt State just seemed overmatched in that regard throughout the game.
Were you surprised at that? Did that surprise you?
Maybe a little, just from the standpoint that, you read what people say on the message boards, and most fans of their own team tend to be the harshest of their own team. And so I had read that was something that seemed to be thematic from some different posters, but, I wanted to be able to see it for myself. And, when you think of teams that certainly play week in, week out in the MIAA, let alone win it with an unbeaten record, you think that that's going to be a strong point for them. And I'm not saying that it won't be as that team matures, but just for what they were yesterday, they had a hard time doing what they wanted to.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I've always given respect, and you know this because we've known each other for a while now, to GLIAC offensive lines. They have length and size and the prototypical NFL bodies. Forever, Joe Berger and 40 other GLIAC guys were in the NFL,
Sure.
So that is never a surprise to me whenever there is a physical advantage sometimes on the line between GLIAC teams or with GLIAC teams. And in some ways it's mirroring the old Northern Sun, NCC, when they used to have a definite size advantage over everybody. And so that's never that big of a surprise to me. But nonetheless, Pitt State is in essentially year 2 of rebuilding. Brian Wright's done a great job. Devin?
Yeah, I think Chuck had a question there for Tony before I go in my thing.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's because I had a chance to watch the game this morning, and I thought that the one thing that just stood out to me, since you guys were talking about line play, was just how disruptive the Ferris State defensive line was. They were in the backfield of Pitt State on almost every play. And, poor quarterback Dobson for Pitt was scrambling and running on almost every drop back, and it just really didn't have a chance to get settled. And that really was kind of the overriding factor in watching that game this morning when I took a close look at it. And the other thing that I think kind of got overlooked is that Pitt State missed a very makeable field goal in the first quarter. One of those turnovers when Ferris really set them up in prime scoring position. I think it was even inside the 10. And the Ferris defense pushed them back, and then Pitt State ended up missing the field goal. So, just some missed opportunities early in the game to potentially to get some points on the board really was a big factor in that as well.
Yeah, and Pitt State had done that before this year. I know in the game versus Northwest that I was at, second half, Pitt State did nothing offensively because they could not block Northwest's front on there. And that was their biggest kind of weakness probably that we didn't talk about enough was they had a good size offensive line. They were decent run blocking, but if you force them to pass, they weren't the best in pass pro. I know Emporia got after them a little bit, Northwest did as well. So they weren't a great pass blocking offensive line there. And as Brandon said, they're a year ahead of schedule. Pitt State is so far with the rebuild happening. Everything this year was gravy. Playing Ferris State to a 3-point game on the road, I think it's great for that program going forward. And it's not only great for them, but it's great for the MIAA for Pitt State to be back towards the top. Because remember, Pitt State and Northwest are both good. Brandon said this for years. It's better for the conference. They get a little more respect naturally kind of just because they're the brand names like Ferris and Grand Valley over in GLIAC. When they're good, it just looks better kind of deal. It just feels bigger when those teams are really good there. So a good showing by Pitt State. We said this before the game happened that Pitt State made less mistakes than Ferris, but Ferris was the more talented team. Both those things kind of came to effect on Saturday, and Ferris was able to beat Ferris State and overcome those mistakes and get a win.
All right. Let's go ahead and transition to Super Region 2. In this case, West Florida, a 38-27 win over Delta State. They had to score 21 unanswered, and they were able to avenge the regular season loss to the Statesmen. They also kept their undefeated playoff road record intact. So, Justin, you've been high on Delta. Were you surprised at all that West Florida was able to do it on the road?
Not really. This is a game between two programs that really have no love lost between them. Delta State beat them earlier in week 3 this year, and you knew it was going to be a slugfest. It's hard to beat somebody twice. I've been high on Delta State all year. I think they've got a lot of pieces in place going forward. They had some good stops in the first half on Saturday. They just weren't able to get those stops that they needed in the second half. It started out, they actually held West Florida to a field goal early in the game. Shegog then gets the football back. They score, go up 7-3, kick another field goal. So it's 10-3 now, end of the first quarter, Delta State. And Pee Wee Jarrett and the Argos, they answer back. He has a 52-yard touchdown pass to David Durden to tie it 10-10. And 4 minutes later, Patrick Shegog's running in the end zone, take a 17-10 lead at the half. Third quarter, they come out. Shegog, 3-yard touchdown run again, take a 24-10 lead in the third quarter. That was all the scoring we had. And you think about those two offenses between Delta State and West Florida, and one touchdown there in the third quarter. And Delta State had a 2-touchdown lead going into the fourth, and just didn't get some stops late in the game that you could tell he kind of got wore out. It looked like on film. West Florida scores just into the fourth quarter, 24-17. 5 minutes later, Shamari Mason goes in to tie it. Delta State actually takes the lead with about 4 minutes left on a field goal. You kind of got the feeling it was going to be too much time and that Delta State was going to need a defensive stand if they wanted to win this football game. And then they go down, they score with 30 seconds left. They took all the time off the clock. 30 seconds left, they score a touchdown, take that 31-27 lead. The Statesmen get the football back, and it was a pick six to cement the game, but it was a 38-27 final. But that last touchdown there just kind of was the nail in the coffin to me. But I think what it really came down to was Delta State didn't get stops defensively when they needed them late in the game, and there's only so many stops you're going to get, against West Florida. They're prolific offensively, and Pee Wee Jarrett really has grown from that week 3 matchup to now, and that offense has evolved. They do a great job not just throwing the football, but running the football. When you think of West Florida, you think of their passing game. But they've done a good job in the playoffs so far of rushing the football. They rushed for 336 and only threw for 161. I know it was raining, but when you throw the football as much as those teams do, you're going to throw the football in rain or shine. So, but West Florida's really, they've established the run.
I just want to throw out there that both teams had over 300 yards rushing. That's how exciting this game was. I also want to mention something because, on Twitter, I had a few Delta State players sort of, reach out talking about they wanted the smoke. And I think in the fourth quarter, they got burned. The same thing that happened at West Georgia happened here, where West Florida scored 28 points in the fourth quarter, just like West Georgia scoring 28 points close to the end of the regular season. So,
sure.
It's just one of those things for Delta that, they're up by 2 scores and then to lose, at the end of the game, because those points that Justin mentioned, West Florida scored at the end, twice in 1 minute at the end of this game.
Right.
I mean, so it just shows you how quickly and how dangerous that West Florida is when it comes to offense, and who knows how it's going to turn out next week that we'll talk about later. But I mean, just what a game and what a finish.
It really was. It was a typical Gulf South game, and I think what you said, Ferg. I mean, just the defense, they didn't get those stops in the fourth quarter, I know they were banged up a little bit. Don't know if that really played a key into it. Don't want to make excuses. Believe me, there's no excuses there at all. But it was a great game. Take nothing away from West Florida. They made the plays when they needed to make it in the fourth quarter, and they didn't quit. And I think a lot of teams down 14 points on the road in the fourth quarter may have thrown the towel in, and they didn't. So credit to West Florida for playing 4 quarters.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing just even earlier there was this game hitting the under kind of deal with that. I think Massey had it a 67, 68 points kind of deal with the over-under. And hitting 65 points, I think, was the biggest surprise here because when I said the Massey prediction was 35-34, we're like, first quarter, kind of like that was kind of the joke that we had there. And I think the defenses kind of came out and played really well. And I think it's hard to have another high-scoring game like that the second time around because defenses adjust so much with that. So good win there for West Florida. And back on the – I think they're going to be at home next week, though, so it'll be a lot of fun for them again.
All right. Let's move on to the second game in Super Region 2. Wingate, everybody's pick, won 23-6 at Benedict. Yeah, we all predicted this would happen the entire season, but the Bulldogs controlled throughout the game and won by that margin. But the key play in the game might have actually come in the second quarter. Justin, you were there, and according to Twitter, you had a great view of a second quarter punt block.
Yeah, it happened actually right in front of us with about 2:28 to go in the half. But, Wingate starts out, they have the only touchdown in the first half on a touchdown pass. Raekwon Simmons, it was 27 yards, only scoring in the first half. Not, when you looked at this game, you really didn't know how it was going to turn out. Benedict has some explosive weapons on offense. And so I thought Wingate did a good job there early in the first quarter of settling down defensively, and that really gave their offense. Wingate got the football first. They missed a field goal actually on their first drive. Their defense settled them down, and then offensively they were able to score that touchdown. They take a 14-0 lead to the Bulldogs in the second quarter with about just under 10 minutes to play. It's going back and forth at that point, and it's still only a 2-possession game. Then that blocked punt that we talked about, Brandon, with 2:18 left in the first half, they come off, they blocked a punt for a safety. At that point, made it a 16-0 ball game. I think it's hard enough to score in this Wingate defense this year. And so to me, that was almost I don't want to say a nail in the coffin, and you can see it right here, the blocked punt, but it 16 points against that Wingate defense was going to be tough. Right. And really up to that point, Benedict had done some good things offensively. They just weren't able to cap off drives. Come out of the half, both teams get a stop defensively. Wasn't until about 2:20, 2:30 in the third quarter left that Benedict got on the scoreboard. They scored that touchdown. They missed the PAT, and then Wingate was able to, in the fourth quarter, a touchdown pass to Desser was the difference maker there, 23-6. But like I said, that blocked punt was really kind of the icing on the cake, in my opinion, for Wingate. It's hard to score on that defense, and they're so good. But take nothing away from Benedict. I know the score, was a 23-6 score. Benedict, they've got some weapons. They can run the football. They've got some really, really good looking receivers on the outside. They're 6'3", 6'4" receivers on the outside that can run. Just they weren't able to make the plays they need to. They had a couple drops I thought that were key at tight spots in that game. But when you look at Benedict, they threw for 299, threw for more than Wingate did, but that Wingate defense, they held them to 38 yards rushing, and that's a difference maker. That defense, you're not going to run on it. There was a 4th and 1, and Benedict actually ran a little inside run play, and it got shut down quick. They had a little success early, actually getting the ball on the perimeter a little bit and forcing that Wingate defense to run sideline to sideline, but they just weren't able to maximize it when it was crunch time, so to speak. But again, take nothing away from that Benedict team. I think they're going to be a force in the SIAC, and I think in Super Region 2. I really do. I think they've got some pieces in place. They did a phenomenal job. This was not only their first time in the playoffs, first time hosting a playoff game. I don't know if y'all have ever been there. Facilities are phenomenal. They hosted South Carolina State Championship, high school championships. Hospitality was phenomenal. They put on a great product. Facilities are amazing. And that team, they're going to be around for years to come, especially not just in the SIAC, but I think in Super Region 2. And, as they continue to grow, they put themselves on the map. And so they have nothing to hang their heads about. I think if they can win in the recruiting battles in Columbia and get some of those South Carolina kids to stay home, they're going to be a tough out for anybody in Super Region 2.
Y'all, let's pour one out for the HBCUs. They're all going now. Oh, what a rough showing, you know. So I unfortunately had to pick Wingate in this game, and the reasons why is because after what they did in Virginia Union, it was kind of like, well, Benedict kind of likes to do the same thing, and I think that 4th and 1 that you talked about, you know, even the announcers for the game were like, well, you know, what are they going to do? And then they run this inside play where like that has been like totally shut down the entire game. And I mean, Wingate just snuffed it out. And because they were driving, they were like, you know, well inside the 30-yard line, and they were driving, and they just shut it down. And it was just like everybody was like, why would you call that? Because it's just not there.
And their quarterback, he's got some wheels. He can run the football a little bit. You know what I mean? And so I thought maybe you'd see a little zone read or a little roll out. Maybe he can run it or throw it in that situation. But yeah, you're right, Ferg.
Yeah, so a couple of other things here. So Wingate's gotten a safety in both of their games this postseason. They're holding, you know, they've held both teams well below their season averages in offense, in scoring. The other thing is the interceptions. Wingate got 2 interceptions yesterday. One was in the end zone, one was really close to the end zone, and that's what killed drives. Because, you know, had Benedict been able to score at least on one of those drives, I think it would have really, you know, made this game a little bit more interesting. But, you know, a lot of credit to Benedict. They found ways to try to move the ball down the field. You know, Eric Phoenix running, I think was a key factor in them getting as many yards as they did. But, you know, Wingate's defense is legit, and Sean Crocker, I think that's the other person that we really should kind of highlight here, because he took a lot of shots and he still was able to get that ball downfield.
And you're right, he did. And there was one play, he was going left to right on the screen, and he steps up in the pocket. It's not there. He delivers it was a floater to the tight end, and he got absolutely demolished when he let go of the football, and he knew it was coming. I think it was that was a huge third down there. I think they actually ended up scoring on that drive. That was the drive, but he saw it was coming, and Sean Crocker is not the biggest, tallest, you know, best looking quarterback you've ever seen, but he's gritty and he gets the job done, and he's able to lead that offense. So yeah, right on, Ferg.
Whit, did you have something that you wanted to add?
Yeah, Ferg, obviously you put yourself out there on Twitter. I mean, I do too, but I mean, you sometimes get yourself in a spot where the HBC community may give you a hard time about some of your actions, namely like picking Wingate. Did you get a hard time from anybody? We always get a little tickle about this kind of stuff.
I got a little bit of a hard time, more so about, you know, there was a question about why, you know, how come Benedict's kind of playing their worst game of the year at this point. And for me, you know, my thought is I always like to measure teams against, you know, again, out of conference play. And in this particular case, I also look at out of conference in the HBCU world is non-HBCU teams.
I get you.
And one of the things that I think really caught Benedict off guard was that their offensive line play was stellar in conference play and against the CIAA teams that they played. The problem was Wingate's defensive line was so physical that they were just blowing the offensive line, you know, they were just blowing them up. And early on, Benedict had to find a way to try to adjust to that. I mean, Wingate had 7 sacks in this game. And a lot of that was Eric Phoenix wanting to drop back and try to, you know, get the ball to one of those big, tall receivers. And he just didn't have the time. And he would try to scramble out, and he just couldn't do it. So I think, you know, I caught a bit of flack for that. But the problem is that, you know, when you're comparing a Wingate team, that's a really hard comparison to make to an existing HBCU team this year because of just how good they were in the trenches on both sides of the ball. And remember, Wingate's beaten 4 HBCUs this year now.
All right. All right, guys, let's go ahead and moved to Super Region 1, where Ashland was unable to win on the road. IUP wins at 19-13, maybe a little closer than some thought. But Chuck, you were in person for a great battle in Indiana.
Yeah, I went out to see this game. Our friend Kerry Moore was in Shepherdstown for the Shepherd Slippery Rock game, so I figured I'd take a little drive out to Indiana. I hadn't been there in quite a few years, so it was fun to take in the game there. I kept waiting for Ashland people to come over and tell me that Matt Witwicky was right in how he called this game and how he predicted it. Never happened. Never happened. Nobody ever came over and said that Witt was right about it. So, but it was a very interesting game because IUP started red hot. They went right down the field on their first two drives of the game. Eight plays, 60 yards on the first one. 9 plays, 73 yards on the second one. Both resulted in touchdowns, and I really just felt, boy, this is setting up so nicely for IUP because the running game was very efficient. They were really kind of punishing with the run game. And when they get that run game going, it just sets up easy play action to hit their playmakers at the receiver positions. And I thought that this is just playing right into their game plan so nicely. But you know what? Ashland really prevented them from establishing the run for the rest of the game. And as the remainder of the game played out, IUP really struggled to continue to run the ball. And the passing game really went cold on them. They ended up with a couple of really costly interceptions. Max Sexton ended up having a really rough 3 quarters after the first one. The passing game almost became a bit of a liability for them. So, Ashland really was able to then kind of adjust their game plan a little bit and get more aggressive in playing run defense. And that really kept them in this game. And I thought even going into the halftime, it was 12-7 at the half. And I thought this should probably be more like a 10 to 14 point lead for IUP, but it just wasn't playing out that way. And then they came out in the second half and they were really flat in the second half. And we talked about the block punt being a big factor in the Wingate Benedict game. Mm-hmm. That happened in this one as well. And IUP actually turned it into their only touchdown, their only points in the second half. And if they don't get that play, I don't think they win the game. I mean, obviously it was a difference on the scoreboard, but even more than that, I think they had no momentum plays in the third quarter. Like none at all. Ashland was not able to take the lead and really kind of put their fingerprints all over that game, but they were hanging in there and they were making more plays than IUP was making. And it just kind of felt like at some point Ashland's going to make a play that swings the game, and they're going to take this away from IUP, and they may or may not be the better team, but they're going to steal this game from them. And that blocked punt was really the only thing that stopped that from happening. So I do have to say that IUP's defense played really, really well. They were good from the first play to the last play, played a very good game, held Ashland to under 300 total yards. So they had a nice day, but offensively, IUP's got a lot of takeaways to work on. It was not a great performance for them. I do think it hurt. They're still without their leading rusher, Desir Stewart. He did not play. Dwayne Brown did play, but he wasn't targeted more than a handful of times. I don't think he's 100% yet. So really interesting to see, going into this regional final with Shepherd, if he is a more integral part of the game plan, because he definitely didn't look like he was 100%. And I think that had a big factor on how their offense performed.
It's funny you say that, Chuck. All those things you're saying, and I'm thinking they're going to have to get it figured out fast because Shepherd's coming for them. So, if you look, let's go ahead and touch on that game. Shepherd with a 37-27 win over Slippery Rock. They earn a right to avenge the loss in the PSAC championship game. It was a good battle at Shepherdstown.
Yeah, kind of back and forth in the first half. They ended up going to the break tied at 20. And so it was really kind of looking like, oh boy, this is going to be a 42-41 kind of game, or down to the last play. It didn't quite turn out that way, but it was a very competitive game. It was pretty much everything we thought we would get from these two teams. But boy, that Shepherd offense had itself a day. The Slippery Rock's defense is good. We saw that last week at Assumption and a couple weeks leading up to that. That Slippery Rock defense is pretty good, but Shepherd's offense was just impressive all day long. Ronnie Brown had 205 yards rushing on only 20 carries. Tyson Bajan had 372 passing.
Right.
And it was really an interesting day for Bajan, because it wasn't necessarily one of those days where you just have a ton of highlight reel passes, but it was a great performance for him. and that it really was a great demonstration of how calm and how poised he is back there. The Shepherd offensive line did a great job all day long, but there were also a lot of plays where Bajent was under heavy pressure, and his ability to feel that and move away from pressure and throw the ball on a rope or find his release valve to get the ball out to safety. And, running the ball is not a big part of his game, but he picks his spots really well. And there were a couple of points in this game where he pulled the ball down decisively and ran the ball. And I think he got a first down almost every time that he did that. So, just the type of performance that's just idyllic for him, just showcased all the skills and the talent that he has and why he's such an exceptional player. But a lot of other Rams really stepped up. They have had some injury problems. Just almost everybody at this point in the season does. Their leading receivers for the last 2 weeks have been the guys who are 5th and 6th on the stat sheet in receptions. So they've been able to really kind of go down the bench, down the roster to find some playmakers who are contributing. Another really interesting thing about this game is that there were 2 Gene Upshaw Award winners or nominees that really went head to head for quite a few snaps in this game. The offensive tackle Joey Fisher from Shepherd and the defensive end DJ Aditawara, who is a great defensive player for the Rock. Both of them are nominees for the Upshaw Award. So pretty cool thing. And actually, that's going to happen again when we talk about Grand Valley and Ferris. There's two players in that game who are also Upshaw Award nominees.
Well, you get the gold star for the pronunciation, Chuck. I was impressed. So, wow.
I don't know if I got it right, but sometimes you just have to commit to what you're going to say and roll with it and let it come out that way. DJ, I hope I got it right. If I didn't, I apologize. He's a great player.
If you say it with enough confidence, people will believe it's the right pronunciation. So well done, Chuck.
He's the national columnist, strong,
all right.
Strong, my brother.
All right, guys. We will be right back, and we'll discuss some other things that happened earlier this week. Just wanted to take this opportunity to thank those who have supported D2 Football this year. D2 Football is free, but it isn't cheap. Your support helps offset our expenses and allows us to expand our coverage. If you like what we're doing, please consider supporting us. Visit d2football.com/support. Or if you want to do it the old-fashioned way, click contact on the website to find our mailing address. But again, thank you for supporting D2 Football. Right, as we've gotten towards the end of the season, we've kind of made notes of some different comments and of some career and season accolades and records that these guys are passing. Chuck, as you pointed out, Caleb Murphy, all divisions, single season sack record with 24.5. That's the most in NCAA history.
Yeah, I think it's worth repeating. That's an all divisions record, not just a D2 record. So congratulations!
Right.
Yeah. Accomplishment.
All right, and one other thing I wanted to point out is a quote that Tony Annese had during his press conference, and we're going to go ahead and play that right now.
I said, this is 4 teams in a region that are all extraordinarily good teams. Pitt State, champions of the MIAA, Grand Valley champions of the GLIAC. Ferris State lost to them by 1. Pitt State beat Northwest Missouri State by 2. And so then all of a sudden, all 4 of these teams are in Michigan playing, an hour away from each other. And so I plead to the national committee that the MIAA and the GLIAC should not be in the same region. Pleading for that. Anybody that has power around here, let's work to advocate for that.
I thought it was an interesting comment because it came from a coach who won. It didn't come from a coach who lost. A lot of times there'll be belly aching when that happens. But in this instance, Annese won. What is everybody's thoughts on what Annese said? Does anybody have any thoughts on him?
Sure, I do, Chuck. Or Chuck, Brandon, whoever you are.
There's quite a difference between
we
the
do
two
look
of
the
us.
same, yeah.
Chuck, Brandon. You're towards the top of my screen. They both got glasses. Similarity ends there. I think it's interesting to me that a coach sees that, realizes that, talks openly about it. I mean, not that others don't, but I just thought that he found it to be a good time to speak to it. And we would all, from a competitive equity standpoint or whatever we want to call it, I think we would all like to see a little bit more splitting up of some of the quote unquote power conferences, no doubt about it. And we've talked about it before. We don't know exactly how you would land things on the map and everything else because we've got other regional travel issues and all that kind of stuff. Because frankly, out in my part of the world with the Northern Sun and the RMAC, there's just wide open spaces where 600 miles is not a big thing. It just is what it is. And so, but I thought it was interesting that he brought it on up. Now, if we can get him to draw up what the region should be, I'm on board.
Mm-hmm. I just want to throw out that we've seen quite a bit of realignment amongst the conferences in Division II, and I think that if you're going to redraw that map, some of those schools that changed conferences may end up facing some of those very teams that they in the conferences that they left. I mean, if you think about the GMAC and the GLIAC, you think about the GAC and the Lone Star and the Gulf South. I mean, if you're going to redo some of those conferences, then, these schools kind of went elsewhere, and now they're going to have to potentially play again in one particular scenario.
Let's go ahead and respond to this comment while we're here. Slip MIAA to 4 and NSIC to 3. Did we talk about that last night, or didn't you have an objection to that?
Well, I mean, there's just we tried looking at it on a map a few different ways, and there's just no good answer right now. I mean, everything ends up being too. Once you get to the teams that are, west of the Mississippi or whatever you want to call it, there's just challenges with how you would break them up and still be able to make it fluid throughout the region.
All right. We're probably not going to solve that problem here today, but we're really good at complaining, so we wanted to get that in there. So
well,
right along with world peace. It's right along with world peace.
It was the right time for Coach Anise to make that remark because of the two games that had just happened. It was the right time for him to say that. And, without getting into all the minutia and trying to actually solve the problem, I do think really what he's alluding to there is it's very possible that those were the 4 best teams in the country this year. That's possible. And you've got those 4 teams playing in round 2, and in a different system, maybe those teams are playing a little bit later. Maybe 2 of those teams are playing in the national championship. So I think that's really where he's kind of going with that.
Yeah,
sure. I just don't like regionalization in general, but that's a different conversation. So,
and well, at the same time, we don't like the fact that some teams have to drive distances, and there are just certain limitations that we have because we're not, the Deuce is not made of money. The NCAA might be, but the Deuce is not, and we have to live within the rules or some guidelines. I think there's a solution out there, but it's not going to be perfect for anybody, and I think that's really that's really the case.
Well, Brandon, but I mean, I think we all have to accept that there is never going to be a perfect solution. And you and I have had this conversation multiple times over the years, as I'm sure you've had with the other guys. There is no perfect in anything, let alone in a playoff format. But could something be better than what we have? I think that's where everybody's got to kind of get comfortable with. All right, it probably could be better. What are the options that we need to entertain to make it better? Knowing that perfect isn't an outcome. There's always going to be somebody that's unhappy. I mean, when the brackets came out a couple of weeks ago, I sat and chuckled at people on Twitter and on the message board saying, "Oh, well, if we added 4 more teams, it would solve all this." No, it wouldn't. Teams 29 through 35 would be complaining the same way that 25, 26, and 27 are right now. That doesn't solve anything. But the idea that we can evolve and make it better progressively, I think that's the thing that over the long haul has probably frustrated me the most of being a fan of D2 the way that I have and the way the NCAA handles it. It just seems like there's a reticence or a lack of interest in trying to continue to improve things. And maybe that happens and gets discussed more than I know. I'm not in NCAA meetings, and maybe somebody at the NCAA would take umbrage with that. But boy, as a fan, I don't see it.
If it's not the reality, it sure is the perception.
Yes.
I mean, I think it kind of goes back to you have teams that are moving around and taking advantage of the current setup, and they're doing so for their own success. And I think they're going to lobby against some change because it will affect the perception of their programs. They're not going to be as competitive in trying to get out of their regions if you change some of that, unfortunately.
Get better then.
Well, I think we're seeing that the exact opposite is happening, Devin. That teams that programs are gaming the system essentially to get into playoffs in multiple sports, not just football. But all right. Yeah. Anyway, okay, let's go ahead and move on. Something much more fun. Harlan Hill.
I was enjoying that.
Oh, okay. Well,
on everybody's face right now.
I said we're really good at complaining. Unfortunately, we're not smart enough to come up with solutions. But let's go ahead and the Harlan Hill Trophy, the list of what was it, 5,000 people or whatever it was, came out this week, and we're going to look at this region by region. Just talk about it free form. I don't even know if you guys knew it was coming, but let's go ahead and look at Super Region 1. And when I look at this, obviously the big, the main focus is going to be Tyson Bagent. Anybody else? So we're looking at, if you had to pick a number 2, who would be the second guy to come out of that region?
The wide receiver from Concord, maybe.
You think so?
No one's seen it once.
That's exactly right. That's exactly
for me,
what I was thinking.
it would be Dwayne Brown.
Okay.
Although Jared Bowie from Concord has had a monster season. He has put up some amazing numbers. And I was actually kind of glad to see that Concord nominated him because I thought they would probably nominate their quarterback, Jack Mangle, who also had a great season. And quarterbacks generally tend to stand a better chance of winning this award. But I thought it was appropriate for them to nominate the wide receiver. He had a great year. Just having seen a lot of these players, quite a few, I've seen all of them, and I've seen quite a few of them in person. Dwayne Brown, unfortunately, at the end of his season, trailed off a little bit because he had some injury. Having seen him quite a few times, though, he's just a really special player. My 2 picks, and remember there will be 2 per region that will be announced as finalists down the road. My 2 from this region as a finalist would be Bagent and Dwayne Brown.
Yeah, and Chuck, you know what? If I recall right, last year, they narrowed it down to 8 total here probably in the next week or so, and each super region took 2, and we had a total of 8 at that point who were finalists. Does that ring a bell to anybody else?
Should be 2.
Yeah. So there'll be two finalists per super region, and but happy to see a couple defensive players nominated in this region as well.
That's what I'm asking. Is there any of these defensive players have a chance to make the final 8 there? If one does, who has the best chance?
Well, we'll get that in another super region, but yes.
Yeah, from this region, I don't think so. Devin, probably in another super region. Nathan Moore, the linebacker from Notre Dame, had a really good season. Jalen McDuffie playing for a Seton Hill team that had a pretty tough season, but he was a standout player. But I don't see any of the defensive players in this region progressing beyond this.
Sure.
Cool. All right, let's go ahead and look at Super Region 2, guys. And I look at Super Region 2. The name that stands out to me is Jada Byers.
Right.
What's much more interesting in this region is who the heck is not on there? Who are we missing, guys?
Patrick Shagag.
That's exactly right. He's not on this list.
Quarterback, Delta State.
Yeah, he's going to be, I can't imagine a scenario in which he's not on the Elite 100 team. And certainly he should be on this list. Obviously, the ball was dropped at his institution and he wasn't nominated. Maybe something could happen. It won't this year, but this needs to be fixed. Like, a kid shouldn't be left out because somebody didn't nominate him. He should be on here without a doubt.
Yeah,
I
he
think
was
he'd be a regional
Golf South
finalist.
Player of the Year. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I think he'd be a regional finalist. Probably him and Byers.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree. Yeah, and I mean David Durden's a strong candidate as well. I just David Durden kind of reminds me a little bit of Shane Zylstra at Mankato a few years ago. He could be the best football player on the field at any given time, but his stats aren't maybe as gaudy as some of the other wideouts. But he's a tremendous player as well. And I mean, frankly, there's quite a few real good players on this list, but not having Shigag on here when he's the Golf South Player of the Year, that certainly does stand out. Yeah, no question.
It's embarrassing. It just signals that there's got to be some other way to make sure that a player like that is not left out of the nomination. He belongs here. I think he'd be a regional finalist. Whit, I thought you were going to talk about the kicker that's on there for Wingate.
Everybody else just sitting there waiting for that one, weren't they? Ferg, I saw the look on your face.
Well, I would tell you this. It's probably odd to have a kicker and a
probably
list. He might be the best. He might be the best dang specialist in the country. I mean,
that's awesome.
He was
very good this weekend.
He was D2 football special teams player of the week twice during the season. He is a great player. Obviously, Wingate did that just to try to get a little recognition for him. I don't think that they had another player that they really felt was a strong candidate. They did that to get the recognition for him, and kudos to them for doing it.
Yeah, well, exactly. I think the style of football that they are playing this year doesn't allow for one guy to be a star and get individual honors. So let's go ahead.
You have any thoughts on Delta State?
Do we want to? He's asking your thoughts on Delta State, who obviously dropped the ball in nominating him.
As Matt would say, sometimes I just put myself in some jams, and I decline to put myself in one right now. Thank you very much. I just want to say real quick that a couple guys that would be the number 2 of my list to be considered.
Please,
Mario Anderson, right behind Byers in terms of rushing yards in this selection. Trey Stewart had excellent year at Limestone. Certainly was great for my fantasy team. Emmanuel Wilson right behind those guys, but just a quick shout out to Ivory Durham and the career that he's had, because he's done. He's done with eligibility, and he did have better numbers than Shigog did, but not as much success obviously at Valdosta, but still was able to really put up some really big numbers regardless. So, but Mario Anderson probably will be my number 2 here.
Gotcha. All right. Moving to Super Region 3. When I look at this, the big names, offensively are TJ Cole, Toriano Clinton. I think without a doubt, and I think that the playoffs have shown this too, the best player in this region should be Caleb Murphy, a defender.
Yeah, I mean Murphy. He's been red hot since the beginning of this year. I mean, he's led the country in sacks or been right up at it, all season. And then he gets 6 in this last game or whatever it was. That's just wild. And he I would say that he has a better chance to get close to winning this. I don't think he wins it, but I think he can get a better chance of getting close to winning this than a lot of defenders in the past.
Agreed.
What do you guys think?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. Could be top 5.
This region is stacked. Everybody on this list is really, really exceptional. And there's a couple of great players on here from programs that don't get a ton of airtime on this show or in our columns. Cooper Callis from Southwest Baptist, Turner Poland from McKendree, both really great quarterbacks who've had outstanding careers. I was happy to see that Southeastern nominated Marquise Gray. He had a phenomenal season for the Savage Storm. And I'll tell you the guy who I might actually put in as my number 2, because Caleb Murphy would be my number 1.
I know who you're going to say, Chuck.
The guy I might put as my number 2 would be Gage Porter, the quarterback from Southern Nazarene. What a season he had. He deserves it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and, all for the small schools in Division 2, and that is one that I would certainly throw up there.
Now, guys, didn't TJ Davis get second last year?
I believe he was a final 3, I think, on there.
I don't remember if he was second or third, but yeah, he's way up there.
I was thinking second, and I realize, we don't sit here and, we're looking at more of the playoffs than anything right now, but I don't know if he gets up quite that high. He may because of name recognition, but his numbers to me didn't just kind of jump off this year. And maybe, they also had heightened expectations as a club, and they didn't reach them.
Yeah, his numbers weren't as good. They had 4 losses this year. He was still the MIAA Player of the Year, but I don't think he should be a finalist at this point this season. I think he's still every good player he was last year. His name recognition will get him some votes there, but I'm not sure if he should be the finalist out of this region kind of deal. I'm with you on that, Whit. He's a really good player, just not quite the numbers necessary to get there this year. He'll be back next year, though, so maybe next year.
Totally agree. All right. Let's go ahead and look at Super Region 4. And when I look at this, there's some residue from last year always, because we're high on Alt, and Kittner had 12,000 yards receiving last year. But we already talked about it in this show, and we've talked about it many times over the course of the season. Not only do I think John Matoka is the favorite in this region, I think he should win the Harlan Hill Trophy. Who disagrees?
Wow, that was a good way to just leave on a high note there. But no.
Nothing else to say here.
You know what? I mean, just like with any of the other super regions, guys who have all had tremendous years, who would all be in the conversation of being, a lead 100 All-American type player. Danny Kittner did not have, the same kind of season he did a year ago. And I think that was a pretty strong ask considering he caught like 140 balls last year. But Brandon Alt had a huge year, but probably just a few too many picks. I mean, he's going to finish the season with over 20 interceptions now, along with having, 40 touchdowns or whatever it is. But I mean, he really powered Bemidji, and obviously, Brennan Bolio, who I think maybe could be an equal candidate here, maybe, every bit as good, to be honest. But I think it's really hard to ignore. Matoka is just, frankly, has just been another level in terms of how he's been able to lead such a good team. And he can do a little bit of everything. He does so many things to help them win. And he's the guy I most see on this page. Who are some other names, guys, that you think have a chance to be have a chance to be a finalist?
Well, first of all, Whit, I was going to ask you, and you kind of alluded to this a little bit, but did Bemidji nominate the right guy? I mean, I know Brandon Alt had another big season, but I always wonder if Bolio wouldn't have been the better nominee.
It's really hard to say because Brandon Alt won the Conference Player of the Year offensively for the Northern Sun. So at that point, it's kind of like Chuck Conventional Wisdom says, hey, that's who I go with. But when you're looking at an award like this, you almost have to kind of handicap how would you do on a national scale. And you could make a case that Bolio is every bit or maybe more the candidate on a national scale when you compare him to the other receivers. But I mean, either way, I really think that Matoka is going to be hard to beat out here. But I do think Alt's got a real chance to be the other guy. Do you guys see anybody who may get that too instead?
I think it'll be Alt. I might throw in a few votes if I had one, or multiple votes for Jaden Johansson, the quarterback from South Dakota Mines. I thought he had a really great season and really kind of put the Hard Rockers on the map. For large parts of this season. And I wish Danny Kittner would have been able to kind of back up the season he had last year with some numbers. Mary wasn't as good of an offense, but what a player he is. I'm happy to see him nominated and see him on this list again. I just don't think that he'll progress beyond the nominee phase.
Right.
All right.
I just want to throw out real quick. There are only 2 players right now that have over 4,000 yards of total offense from the quarterback position. That's Bajent and that's Matoka. They're right there, 4,400 yards. So I mean, it's a pretty big deal. That's pretty rarefied air right now.
Right.
It is. All right. All right. Well, that's the list. We'll obviously talk about it more as the candidates are whittled down to the final final selections. So, guess what, guys? It's regional finals time. I don't know about you, but you work so hard to do the D2 football stuff over the course of the year, and inside of that, it can be a grind. But then you look up and you're like, oh crap, we've got 3 weeks left, and it's crazy. And so we're already at that point. We have the regional finals coming up. Let's look at it. We're going to do the pick 'em, but we'll do that later. Let's look at the finals and maybe try to glean some information from each other, cheat off of each other, whatever we got to do. But let's look at Super Region 1 first. As we look at the bracket, IUP and Shepherd were able to advance, and we'll have a rematch of a game played earlier this year. I've been picking against Shepherd, and again, we're talking about picks later, but I feel like Shepherd's playing a lot better right now than they had previously, and IUP maybe is not playing as good as it had. Would you object to that observation, Chuck? Or
Well, I think no. I think Shepherd had the type of performance that they really needed to have last week against Slippery Rock, because if you go back and look at the playoff game against New Haven last week, right, and the PSAC championship game at IUP the week before, those were their 2 lowest point outputs of the season. And their 2 toughest games. And obviously those are 2 very good teams as well. But they really needed to kind of flip that switch and kind of rediscover themselves and kind of get that offense rolling again to set themselves up to maybe win the region again. And they really were able to achieve that against Slippery Rock. So if I'm in that Shepherd locker room, I feel really good about where we're at heading into this game. Now, conversely for IUP, like I said, their defense has been good from start to finish, and they were last week against Ashland. But offensively, you kind of have to wonder if maybe they're starting to run out of a little bit of steam. Now, again, that has to do a little bit with some injuries that they've sustained, and they have depth, but that starts to become an issue as well when you absorb some more injuries, and you can't dress as many guys for playoff games as you can in the regular season. So I definitely feel like it's 2 teams that, although they're both winning, might be 2 teams that are kind of heading in the opposite directions heading into this game. So, yeah, I mean, obviously IUP is going to feel good about the defense, and they match up well with Shepherd's offense. They do. We saw that a couple weeks ago. But I think if I'm Shepherd, I feel really good about going up there with a better game plan and a better effort, possibly some better weather conditions, and get that win.
Okay. Let's look at Super Region 2, guys. Well, we've got, as I joked before, we all picked Wingate to make it to the regional finals, jokingly, but they're going to play West Florida. Another thing that we've talked about is how good West Florida is on the road in the playoffs. They're going to play the first home game at their on-campus stadium in the playoffs. I think, at least in my view, this is the one that, of all these semifinal game or regional final games, this is the one that most people, I think, would pick West Florida to win. So, Justin, I need you to give me an example or a case. Make a case for how Wingate will win the game.
They're going to win the game because they're going to be able to shut down West Florida's offense. We think of West Florida, we think about them throwing the football. They've actually rushed for more yards than they've thrown this year. They're gonna have to take away the run for West Florida, force them to have to throw the football, and put them into some unfavorable situations. That's the first thing they're gonna have to do. They're going to have to win on defense. The second thing is they're going to have to – we talked about their special teams. They're going to have to be able to flip the field on special teams and pin West Florida deep and ultimately get those stops defensively. And then I think Shaw Crocker, he's just got to take what West Florida gives him, manage the football game, and just do what he's done all year. Don't try to do too much. Just manage the football game, take what they give you, and the scores will come. Defense is travel, right? And so – a solid defense can keep you in some ball games, and when you're in a football game late in the fourth quarter, on the road in the playoffs, anything can happen. So I think those are the keys for me for Wingate to win this football game. They're going to have some big plays on defense and create some turnovers.
All right, now somebody else tell Justin why he's full of junk.
Well, I still have but the SAC columnist in me still has PTSD from the first 2 times that these 2 teams met in the playoffs. It did not go well at all for Wingate. Both of those were at home. I went to both of those games. No, I think that they're going to match up a little bit better with West Florida this time. And I think the key for them, and Justin actually hit on all the right things, I believe. I think the biggest key is they're going to have to force some turnovers from Pee Wee Jarrett, who will make some mistakes from time to time. He's a great athlete and a great player, but he will make some mistakes. I still keep waiting for Wingate's offense to just not be able to do enough. I've seen too many times where they get into a big game and the defense plays really well, but the offense just doesn't quite have enough. And I don't think that West Florida is the type of team that you can count on holding them to 10 points. So Wingate's done that in, I think, 9 out of 12 games, or 10 out of they've held almost everybody to 10 points or less. I don't think you can count on that with this West Florida team. I think West Florida gets into the 20s probably pretty easily. Well, not easily against that defense, but I think they'll get into the 20s. And that means that Wingate's going to have to score some points. And I just don't know that they're going to have enough scores in them to win this on the road.
Here's my thing with that, Chuck. And I think you're spot on with that. But, we talk about Pee Wee Jarrett, right? And when you think of years past, like you alluded to, you think of their ability to throw the football. And I think there's one of 2 things, and we're about to find out, is West Florida throws the football and they're dangerous when they throw it. So, it reminds me of a little bit of Valdosta State last year. They have the ability to throw it deep, so you're going to play them in coverage and you open up run game. And is West Florida taking advantage of what the opponents are giving them and being able to run the football? But the other thing to take into account is Rudy Carlton, who's the offensive coordinator at West Florida, got there in February. So, is his style a little bit different? And are they going to be a run the football team? And if that's the case, that's fine. But I think it's going to be hard to run it on that Wingate defense. They're going to have to be able to throw it. And so my question then with Pee Wee Jarrett is, can they throw the football enough in this game to win?
Is Pee Wee your running quarterback by any stretch?
Yeah.
Because
More so than Austin Reed was, but is he the burner? No, I don't think so, but he can run the football.
Right. He can pick up some chunks.
Yeah.
He's not going to bust for 100, but he's going to get you a first down if you need it.
Because I think that may also help, like with the West Florida playing this defense. I mean, running it inside is going to be extremely tough. But if that's something that you use to try to loosen up that defense a little bit, that's great. I just want to throw out there that, Wingate's secondary is very, very good. And I think that, if West Florida somehow becomes one-dimensional where they're not able to run the ball, that they're going to have a bit of difficulties, I think.
Well, and one of the things I haven't really had a ton of time to watch the tape on them is, and I think you make a good point. We talk about their defensive front a lot, Ferg, Wingate's defense. And so, their front is phenomenal. Their secondary, we don't give them enough credit. Nobody really talks about that. But I think a matchup in this game that's really intriguing to me is because I think Wingate had some pivotal interceptions on Saturday against Benedict, but is there matchups in the slot on the linebackers? Can West Florida take advantage of those mismatches, those slot receivers on linebackers and hurt that Wingate defense? Because, their corners and safeties can cover. They can cover well. It's what can they take advantage of in the inside to open up those running lanes? If they can get that Wingate defense out of the box, they can start running the football again. But it's going to be challenging. So to me, the key matchup is, can you use the slot receivers to impact the linebackers and try to open up some of those running lanes?
And I think that's probably the vulnerable spot that we saw on Saturday was the middle of the field was where Benedict was able to really get their offense moving.
All right, let's go ahead and look at Super Region 3. Give Chris the last word on that. All right, Grand Valley and Ferris State, the rematch of a game earlier. So tell me, Tony, what do the Lakers have to do to come out on top for the second time this year against the Bulldogs?
Well, so I mean, these two teams, and we talked about this ad nauseum going into the first matchup back in October. They do a lot of the same things, and they do a lot of the same things well. So I mean, for Grand Valley, it's make fewer mistakes than Ferris does. I mean, I think that's really the key to this game for either side is making fewer mistakes.
Okay.
Finding a way for the offensive line to perform in the same fashion that they did in the first game. You know, the defensive front for Ferris had some impact in that game, but they were, I'm not going to use the term neutralized, but they were not as dominant in that game as they were in other games. And so I think that's, if the Lakers are able to replicate that, and if they're able to, do a little bit more in the pass game in terms of hitting on things when they're there and taking what the defense gives them, I think they can do well. I think for Ferris, again, they have to avoid the mistakes. They've got to find a way for their offensive line to actually do a little bit better job, I think, of handling what Grand Valley wants to do with their defensive front. And I think it'll be interesting to see, too, now that Malik Mitchell's had a couple of starts under his belt since that point. I mean, he hadn't played, in over a month when they played back in October. He's at least been playing of late. So will his ability to have been in games and getting healthier and everything else, will that have an impact on things going into this one?
Right. Good thing these teams like each other so much.
Hey, it's a rivalry.
It is. It is. Fun. So two great teams going to play. Let's go ahead and move on to Super Region 4. I think this one actually turned out, I would say 3 is pretty accurately. We thought it would turn out like that. This one as well. Colorado Mines this time going on the road to face Angelo State. Close game last time. Is an overtime game, right, Whit? Wasn't the previous game an overtime game?
It was.
Okay.
And I think that kind of prepares us a little bit, Brandon, for the expectation of this being a real tight game. Angelo did outgain Mines 437 to 273 in the last contest. 273 is a really low number for Mines, guys. When you take a look at their season stats, I mean, they only had 16 first downs in that football game. It makes you wonder a little bit, is Angelo's defense strong enough? I mean, you saw what they were able to do with Bemidji. They kept them under 200 yards. And it makes you wonder, is that defense, especially at home, strong enough to limit Mines? And then on the other side, Angelo, typically runs the football pretty well. Bemidji sold out to stop their run, and they were able to keep Amayabu under 100 yards. But you had Bronkhorst as a quarterback. He was able to throw for 377, which is a pretty high number for him.
Right. That's atypical, certainly.
Yeah, they don't really ask him to do that typically. And in their first contest this year, Brandon, from the quarterback position, Bronkhorst with Angelo, he was very 17 to 34. He had no touchdowns, had 2 picks. And, it was one of those kind of games where their running game really won that contest for them. So it's a tough one here because Mines is on the road, of course. It's not like they haven't played at tough places. They played at Grand Valley week 1. They're trying to amend the loss from earlier in the season. But I do have a little bit of an asterisk or X factor concern is that, Michael Zeman was hobbling around and came out of that football game with Mankato 2 different times. And he seemed to kind of not have that extra gear. And he never really got loose. And I think that's probably an indication of kind of a nagging injury that he's having to deal with. And then coming off an extremely physical game with Mankato, that was like a street fight. And I think that makes you wonder, is Mines going to offensively be at their full strength that way? I think it's going to be a heck of a contest, and it's probably the one we all kind of thought was coming.
Yep, absolutely. So, all right, guys. Well, since we previewed what is coming this week, let's look at the pick'em from last week. And let me pull that up really quick. The results are not so embarrassing this week, so I'm happy to put these up. If you look, the worst we did was 3 losses. Now, some of that is because of the games are a little easier to pick, or there's a clear favorite or a clear underdog. But we didn't do too bad. The updated pick'em standings, though, Chuck and Matt are both tied for the lead. Devin would be in 3rd. I would be in 4th. Justin in 5th, and Chris in 6th. So Tony,
Chris, you went 7 and 1, and you're still in last.
Tony might be winning this thing if he'd been doing this all year with us.
He might be.
He's been successful.
Yeah,
so.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I had some iffy weeks that stayed off the record. So
you see Matt's 1-4, another 1-4. I mean, he's still tied for first after those. So
all right. So anyway, so that's the standings. Let's go ahead and pick some games this week. The games we are going to pick are going to be the 4 regional final games and then 3 bowl games. Sprung those bowl games on you guys. So
yeah, you did.
Yes, I did. So Matt told me I should warn you guys. I failed to warn you. So
nice work, guys.
It's all right. It's
That's
time.
number 2. He could have warned us.
No. That's not how it works.
That's got his pages and pages of research over there.
That's right. That's exactly how this worked.
If you want to see the text messages, we made this decision about 2 hours ago. So it wasn't a lot of thought, and he hadn't had much time to research. So let's go ahead and we'll start in Super Region 1. I've been picking first. I'm going to pick the Shepherd Rams to win on the road. Chuck Bittner.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Shepherd as well.
Okay. Devin.
So, yeah, I'm going to take Shepherd. Also, I just want a quick shout out here. We did the Massey stuff last week. Massey actually went 7-1 in the games last week as well, and 6-2 for the favorites against the spread. So, Massey did a good job actually last week picking games as well. Massey has Shepherd 28, IUP 27, Shepherd a 1.5 favorite, 51%. I'm going to go with Shepherd in this one as well.
Okay. Ferg.
Shepherd.
Okay. Witt.
Wow, I wasn't expecting. I thought we would be right down the middle on this one. By the way, I think this is maybe the toughest week to pick. I really do.
Yeah, it's great.
Shepherd hasn't been at full strength at wideout. Maybe they're getting back to it a little bit. I think it's going to be IUP got him before. I think it's going to be real hard for them to get Bajan again. I like Shepherd.
Okay. And Tony.
Yeah, I think I like Shepherd in this one too. The way you kind of characterized things earlier, where Shepherd seems to have righted the ship a little bit over the last week or two. That's kind of the general impression I have too.
All right.
IUP's winning now.
Right. The kiss of death has been bestowed.
Hey, Justin's got a pick still. Hold up.
Justin, who you got?
But dang, y'all got me all off kilter here. I was gonna say IUP to start with, and since I'm just gonna go against the grain. I'm gonna stick with my gut and go IUP.
Okay,
we're good.
We're winning.
Ferg, you can't be throwing darts at anybody right now.
All right. Okay, so you switched your pick then, Justin, right?
Say what now?
You switched your pick to IUP.
He's IUP.
Yeah. Okay.
I never picked it. Yeah,
he made his pick.
Yeah.
I must have read. I'm sorry. It's late. All right, let's go ahead and go to Wingate, West Florida. Chuck is going to pick first.
Ooh, okay. Well, I'll take some heat for this because I know I have some Wingate followers, but I'm going to pick West Florida.
Okay.
I love that Wingate defense. Shout out to, as much as we've talked about Wingate and their defense, and we've mentioned their head coach, Joe Reich, I want to mention their defensive coordinator, Rashawn Jordan. He's been with Coach Reich for, something like 16 or 17 years. Just really great part of that staff, great football coach, and I'm so happy for the success that he's had with that unit this year. I think that they will be good. I think they're going to match up better with West Florida than they did in 17 and 19 when they really weren't able to stay on the same field with the Argos. I do think they're going to match up better, but I do think West Florida will win the game.
All right. Devin.
So, Whit, what do you think the Massey score says here for this one?
Ooh, I'm guessing West Florida by 2 scores.
Yeah, West Florida's a 10.5-point favorite, 28-17. Fun fact for you, Wingate is a 23rd ranked team in Massey, below 4-7 Central Missouri. So with that one, so
Makes
76%
sense.
win probability there for West Florida. I'm taking West Florida here at home as well. But I think it's going to be maybe a little less scoring than 28-17 just because the Wingate's defense is going to hold them down just a little bit, but West Florida still wins.
All right. Justin.
So if you ask me tomorrow, I may change my mind in this one. I don't really have a feel for it yet. The only thing I guess my gut right now is that, Wingate is their defense travels, and if they can keep that thing close into the fourth quarter, you never know how it shakes out, especially when you have a solid defense like Wingate does against a team that's as high powered as West Florida. And on paper, you're probably going to say it's West Florida. Everybody's going to say West Florida, West Florida, West Florida. If their defense can keep them in it, I think they got a really good chance. I'm going to take Wingate in this one because I think they can do some things on defense. But you ask me tomorrow, I might have a different pick, but I'm going to take Wingate tonight.
All right. Chris.
Walk that dog, West Florida. Walk that dog.
Okay. Matt.
Well, I was kind of hoping I was going to go out on a limb here, but Justin's already stolen some of my thunder. I think there's a formula here for Wingate in that West Florida is a run-first football team. And I think Wingate can really slow them down and force them to the air. Now, Pee Wee Jarrett can make plays with his feet, but I think that they can still contain a little of that. Pee Wee Jarrett's completed 39% of his passes so far through 2 rounds of playoffs. He can make huge plays down the field, and if he's able to, West Florida rolls in this game. But I'm going to roll the dice, and I'm going to take Wingate in this one to stay hot and find a way to win a close game.
All right. Tony.
I think West Florida's just got too much firepower.
I agree. They're going to roll. All right. Let's start with Ferris State and Grand Valley. And we will start with Devin Albertson.
So this one has Grand Valley a 1.5-point favorite in this one, 24-22, 53% win probability there for Grand Valley. Man, this is back and forth. As good as I think Caleb Murphy and Ferris State is, kind of as Tony was saying earlier, I think Grand Valley just makes a few less mistakes here in this one, and they outlast Ferris again. Give me Grand Valley in this one at home.
Okay, Justin.
I think to this game's dang toss-up.
It's awesome, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
So good.
I think there's a couple different ways to look at this one, though. And I think, like, you look at Ferris State and the success that they've had, and I think Grand Valley, yes, they've beat them once. I think it's hard to beat anybody twice in a season, and if you could do it, great. And I think, right now Grand Valley's sitting number 1, but I still think that they don't feel that. I think that they want to go out there and they want to assert their dominance in this one and prove to everybody that they are the number 1 team and that it's theirs now. And so I'm going to take Grand Valley in this one.
Okay. Chris.
Ferris.
Okay. Whit.
I think this is the hardest one to pick on the whole board. Ferris is going to be pissed off after what happened last time. And the thing is but I kind of have mixed feelings about this because Grand Valley turns the ball over less from what I see in bigger games, whereas Ferris State has turned the football over. I mean, how many times they turned over the last game? 4 or 5?
5.
And yeah, so I think Ferris State's going to come in hopping mad, and maybe that ends up being the day. But I think Grand Valley is flat out. I think they're better at the line of scrimmage. And I mean, Ferris State may prove otherwise. I mean, heck, they look great against Pitt. But I'm going to go with what I think maybe is a safer pick, and I'm going with Grand Valley.
All right. Tony.
So for as much as I think it's so hard to beat teams twice in the same year, I think Witt's on to where my gut tells me as well, and that's that over the course of 4 quarters, Grand Valley has shown that against some of the best, not only offensive lines in the country, but defensive fronts in the country, that they can outlast you. And I think the other telltale for me on this is that, we talked last time when they played Grand Valley held Ferris to 81 yards rushing. They only had 104 yards yesterday against Pitt State. And Ferris, again, is a run-first team. And when Malik Mitchell's running things, they tend to be a little bit more of a pass-first team. And I just don't know if they're as effective from that with that type of an approach. And hey, maybe they'll mix things up and do something different. But I think with that approach, I think even watching the game yesterday, the way that Pitt State figured out how to defend things, it looked a lot like the way Grand Valley defended them in the first go-around. So I just, Ferris has got too many guys hurt. They're lacking a marquee guy in the middle as a running back. Xavier Wade's been out all year. Brandon Childress hasn't played the last couple of weeks. Marcus Taylor's been doing yeoman's work, not only doing what he normally does in the pass game, but trying to run between the tackles. I just don't know if that lack of a consistent run game is going to be a problem for them. And if they turn it over at all, then I think the advantage swings towards Grand Valley. Grand Valley's got to play better on offense than they did yesterday, but this is a 50-50 game, guys. I just think the momentum, the way things have gone, even since that meeting back in week 7, I think Grand Valley's got the slight edge here.
I think the Lakers played the worst game they're going to play in the playoffs yesterday. And I think it gets better from here. I'm going to pick the Lakers because I thought they were the best team between the two this year. All right. And Chuck.
Yeah, it almost seems a disservice that that Ferris isn't getting any love in the picks here, but I'm going with Grand Valley as well. I think that they can hold up against that Ferris defense in a way that Pitt State simply was not able to yesterday. One thing I'm going to watch very carefully when I watch this game is Caleb Murphy when he's matched up with the offensive tackle Quentin Barrow from Grand Valley. When these teams played in October, there were a lot of snaps in that game where Quentin Barrow was man-to-man against Caleb Murphy, and he won a lot more than he lost against Caleb Murphy, in my opinion. And Caleb Murphy is probably the best defensive football player in the entire country, regardless of position. But Quentin Barrow might be the best offensive lineman in Division II and is probably going to be an NFL player next year. So I'm really going to be watching that very carefully. If he can handle Caleb Murphy man-to-man as he did pretty effectively, I think that gives that Grand Valley offensive front a really good chance to hold their own, establish a little bit of a run game, and give Cade Peterson some time. So I'm going to go with the Lakers.
So who took Ferris in this then? I was trying to keep track of it.
Ferg.
Just Ferg?
Yep, just Ferg. All right. Game. We're now to our fourth game. And does that mean Justin has to lead off for Colorado Mines at Angelo State?
Ooh, all right then. I think Angelo State's has the edge at home. I thought, Mines, they did a great job recovering. I thought maybe they had some weaknesses exploited this week against Duluth. And so for that reason, I'm going to take Angelo State.
Okay. Chris.
Mines.
Okay. Matt.
My heart tells me Mines, but with possibly Mines being a little dinged up potentially, I probably think I got to go with Angelo State and their defense at home. So what am I going to? I'm taking Mines. Screw it.
All right.
Let's go.
All right. Tony, who you got?
I really don't. I'm at a loss with this one, guys.
It's a good one. Another good one.
It is a whale of a matchup. I think Mines, the first go around, probably had the better of it, and they just were coming off that huge emotional game against Grand Valley. And look, you guys can say what you want. Teams the week after they play Ferris or Grand Valley, their record is awful because the demands that those two teams put on you are so massive.
Sure.
I actually like Mines in this game, except that they got to make a huge trip. They had another emotional win last week, and like Witt says, if they're dinged, their whole MO is precision, man. And if they're missing a couple of key pieces or they're at least compromised, I just wonder if Angelo's defense is going to be better prepared this time around. Yeah, this is one I really don't know. I'm going to take Angelo, but I really am just picking it out of the air. I really think Mines can win this game.
I am going to pick Colorado School of Mines, or as the guy last year on the broadcast said, the Mines.
The Mines.
You guys do. Chuck, who you got?
Yeah, I actually think this is the toughest one to call on the board because I can see a path to victory for either team, and Mines has been making some of my commentary look good all season because when they were 0-2, I was very firm in my belief that they were going to win 9 straight games, win the Armac,
yeah, we all were.
Playoffs.
We were all with you, Chuck.
So they've made us look good there, but I'm going to go with Angelo State here. I think being at home makes a big difference in this game. I think that they're really hot. I think they're a tad bit healthier, and I'm going to go with the Rams. Okay.
Devin, who you got?
So Massey has this as a 2.5-point favorite for Angelo, 31-28, 54% for that. And I've gone back and forth on this as well. I'm going to roll with Mines here. I just think best player, even though it's on the road, it's a really close matchup there, but give me Mines in this one. But it's going to be a fantastic game. Super Region 3 and 4 have some just powerhouse games here that are going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the 3 bowl games that will be played on Saturday. The first one is the Live United Bowl. And Ferg, you get to pick Emporia State or Southeastern Oklahoma.
You know, it's interesting. These are 2, for me, random teams that I happen to keep up with, both because I had a player from both of these teams on my fantasy team.
Of course you did.
Of course I did. In Braden Gleason and Marquise Gray. And, you know, Gray is a monster. I mean, the way that they just deliver the ball to him and he just goes and snatches it and he's a walking touchdown. But I think we've kind of seen how some of this is played out between the NYAA and the GAC, and it's not pretty. And because of that, I'm going to go with Emporia in this game.
Okay. Whit.
Well, if he's a walking touchdown, I'm a walking cheeseburger. But I will take him Emporia State here in this one. I think they win this game by 20.
Okay, Tony.
Shoot fits, Whit.
Yeah.
So I just think they're gonna be real good. I think they're gonna get out and run now, unless they do one of those things that you see in FBS where you didn't get what you didn't make the dance you wanted to, and then you get mad and you don't show up.
All right.
I don't think any of that nonsense is happening here.
Agreed.
Emporia.
Yeah, agreed. I think the Hornets were almost in the playoffs. I think they're going to win this thing. Chuck.
Well, these same 2 teams played in the same bowl game, or I think it was the same bowl game or a bowl game last year.
Yeah.
And Southeastern won that one. It's really close. I think it was a field goal game, 37-34 or 34-31, something like that. Southeastern won that matchup. But I think Emporia is the better team this year, so I'm going to go with them.
All right. Devin.
So Massey agrees with everybody here. Has Emporia State 37, Southeastern Oklahoma 21.
Yeah,
so my AA team. Of course it does.
Yeah, but it's 15.5-point favorite there for this one. It's a pretty big spread there. With that, I think Emporia State wins. I don't think they cover, but I think they do win here. I just need to get a chance to see Braden Gleason in the game. Is always a lot of fun. So give me Emporia. I do wonder. I think this is a good chance for them after losing that Northwest game in the regular season to kind of get that bad taste out of their mouth going into 2023. So I do like this game for Emporia State. I think they win comfortably, but not 15.5 points kind of deal.
And Coach P, you are the last selector of this game.
I'm going to take Emporia State.
Okay.
Guys,
we all picked Emporia, and this might be the first time that we are all on the bulletin board of a team involved in a bowl game. I can
let's go
because we've never picked them before. So all right,
I can't wait for it. Let's bring it.
Southeastern Oklahoma.
If Southeastern wins, we know what's going to be on there, right?
For sure.
The walking cheeseburger comment.
They're going to bring some heat. They're going to bring some heat to Whit, and then he's going to respond with something snarky about not making the playoffs. And
no, I wouldn't point out the obvious.
Okay.
Though, hey, I do wish this game was Emporia versus Harding. That'd be, I think, a much more interesting game. But some bull stuff, politics thing happened there. That was weird. So I wish this was Emporia versus Harding. I think it'd be a better game.
No,
that was the case.
I just don't think Harding wanted to play.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
All right, Whit, you're going to be the first. Truman and Tiffin.
If I'm not mistaken, I think this game is being played in Hobart, Indiana, which is like just outside Chicago, which is an interesting spot for a bowl game in D2. But
it's the crossroads.
Considering there's pretty much no one there from D2, but no.
Exactly.
Well, they can have some deep dish pizza after the game, no matter what. At least I know
absolutely.
I would. But I am going to go with Tiffin in this one. I think, if I'm not mistaken, hey, Mr. Massey, didn't they play during the season and to an overtime game? Is that right?
It's a 1-point game.
Okay, there we go. There we go. So and Truman got him, if I remember right. So I'm expecting nothing like having a repeat game in a bowl. But I'll take Tiffin in this one to avenge their loss.
All right, Tony.
Truman.
I will pick the Bulldogs as well. Chuck.
I guess this bowl must have been arranged by the championship committee since it's a rematch of a regular season game.
Ooh.
Come on, we've just thrown shade at that. I'll put
well done, sir. Well done.
Funny.
I'm going to go Truman in this one. I think that they're a little bit better than where Tiffin's at right now. It was a 1-point game when they played in overtime earlier in the season, but I think Truman wins this one by a touchdown.
Okay, Devin.
Give me Tiffin. They're a 2.5-point favorite. Give me Tiffin.
Justin.
Truman State.
Okay, and Ferg.
I feel like you need to throw on some Bone Thugs and Harmony with this one. I'll take Truman as well. Go 2-1 with Bulldogs this week.
All right. Very good. And for our last game to be selected, East Central will be playing Texas A&M Kingsville in the Heritage Bowl. Tony, you go first.
I'm going to take East Central in this one.
Okay. I'm actually going to pick the Tigers as well. Chuck.
Yeah, I think East Central is probably the better team here, but I think maybe Kingsville has something to prove after the way their season ended, and I'm gonna go with the Javelinas here.
Okay. Devin.
I have not been very high in Kingsville most of the year on there, so give me East Central. East Central is a 3.5-point favorite due to Massey, 24-21. 60% win probability there, so give me East Central by a touchdown in this game.
Well, the GLIAC did play the MIAA, so Justin, your selection.
The GAC, yeah.
Texas A&M Kingsville.
Sorry, you're right. Yep.
We can't forget about the GAC, Brandon. We'll get yelled at again.
That's what I meant, but I don't ever call it the GAC because it sounds like you're throwing up. Chris.
I'm going to go with the A&M brother going with Kingsville.
All right. And Matt, you are the last of the night.
Well, Kingsville had a little bit of a popcorn fart finish, losing their last 4. So East Central beat, was it Henderson? They beat Southeastern Oklahoma towards the end, if I remember right. I'm going to take East Central on this one.
All right. Very good. Well, we'll see how poorly we do next week. We're due for a bad week after the good one that we had.
No, y'all are due for a bad week.
All right.
We speak French now.
All right. Thanks to Jake Walter, Flow Sports, KOAM TV. Although I forgot to play your highlights, my apologies. RMAC Network, PSAC Network, LSC Network, HBCU League Pass Plus, and Delta State Athletics. Again, a reminder to follow us on social media at D2Football on Twitter, Facebook.com/D2Football. What's that? Oh, I'm sorry. I had a reverb in my headset. Sorry about that. Again, during the week, these columnists will be breaking down the games, different perspective than what you're used to. And on game days, you can access our scoreboard. Sorting them, not a big deal now, but I keep seeing Twitter tweets and I see questions on the message board. Hey, where can I find a link to the game? They're always on our site every week. There's no reason to go anywhere else. So head there if you want to find a link to the games. We also have the biggest collection of D2 fans in the country on our message board, and we'd invite you to sign up. It's not automatic. You don't just get automatically approved like you do with some others. I manually approve them all to keep the spam away from the board. Literally, it is, 100 spam accounts a day try to sign up at minimum. So I try to limit that. So sometimes there's a delay. Hit us up on Facebook or hit us up on Twitter if we're slow with that. Let's go ahead and look at some questions from the games today. Let's look at how I want to do it. Let's look at this one first. So
graphic down.
Thank you. Hold on. Let me stop that. Good call. So Ronnie Brown is a beast in the open space. He's been phenomenal in the playoffs so far this year for Shepherd. I think he's been phenomenal all year, hadn't he, Chuck?
He has. He's been great all year. I think it's good for him that he's been talked about the last couple of weeks a lot more because he has been great all year. But when you get to this point in the season and you have so many different weapons at your disposal to diversify that offense, it just makes it that much more dangerous. So yeah, he's been a huge factor.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Chuck, while we're there, there's somebody complimenting you. Your column was just right about the West Florida Delta State game.
Well, I starred this one, James. Yeah. Thank you for saying that, and thank you for complimenting me because I know, James, that I was way off in round one when I picked Limestone to beat West Florida, and you gave me a lot of reasons why that pick was wrong, and you were correct. So I appreciate you saying that I was right about West Florida and Delta State.
All right, let's go ahead and take that off. All right, let's talk about. There's a couple. Let's go back to Bajent, and then we'll hit them in the order. So Tyson Bajent has had so many different receivers this year due to graduation and injury, and watching him play in person many times, he makes them all up their game. I think graduation is something all college people deal with, all college teams deal with. Injury, that's hit and miss, but it's not been as easy this year for Bajent, but he still had a good year.
Well, I think it's this last part of it that I really wanted to speak to because that's what great quarterbacks do, is they really get everyone around them to elevate their play. That's one of the things he does, and it's one of the things that John Matoka does really well, who we've talked about, and I think it's one of the things that Cade Peterson does really well.
Okay, all right, let's look at this one. All right, Caleb Murphy might have won the Harlan Hill if yesterday's performances were considered. But the voting was already done. I don't believe that it would have mattered, Clee. I just don't think a defender is going to win the Hill. And part of the reason, and Chuck will understand this as well, because he many times has picked the defensive player of the week and many times has helped. The thing about offensive numbers is that there's a big difference between 150 yards rushing and 250 yards rushing. It's a big number that's easy to be seen. But when somebody has 5.5 sacks or 5.5 tackles for loss and somebody has 4.5, that difference isn't as big in people's minds. I think that has a psychological effect on a defender ever winning because nobody really understands and can quantify what 24.5 sacks is. And I just don't think that people understand it, but they understand 3,000 yards or 4,000 yards or 50 touchdowns or whatever. I think
it's just more fun.
Yeah. And part of the problem too, Brandon, is the people who are voting, they're obviously not watching all of these players play. And, I get that that's a tall ask, but I mean, I hear what you're saying when you see somebody have, a 150-yard game versus a 250-yard game, and you could see what that statistical difference is. it's tough to gauge unless you're watching all the games, because when you watch somebody have 6 sacks versus 3,
exactly,
the impact that they are making on the game is so noticeable. And so that's one of the struggles is it's so tough to vote for these awards, because most of the people that are voting don't get to watch all the players that are actually up for them. And that's, again, no system's perfect, like we said earlier.
Yeah, quite frankly, they don't have time. These are sports information directors who are many times running a one-man shop. They barely have time to keep up with every little stupid thing that they've had to do. And, in the past 20 years, social media and that kind of content has been added to their list of things to do. So I definitely agree that it's tough for them to watch all games and to really look at who is in the running for the Harlan Hill. Chuck, did you tag the one at the bottom about Murphy having 0 sacks? Did you tag that one, or did I accidentally tag that one?
I may have tagged on, but I actually kind of spoke to that a little bit earlier with in regards to the first time when they played and Quentin Barrow and him being matched up. So yeah, it's just it'll be something to watch for.
Okay.
I don't know whoever was talking there if their stats were correct.
Yeah, he had a bunch of tackles actually.
He had some tackles. I don't know if he had any solo, but he had some tackles in that game.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Let's look at this one before we go on the rant in the show. What is the Final Four matchup you want to see the most? I think that's a fun question.
Yeah.
I would love to see Mines and Shepherd play, whether it's in semifinals, championship game, regardless of circumstance. I would love to see Mines and Shepherd play. I think that they're kind of similar football teams that have a lot of the same strengths. I would love to see those two teams play.
And a matchup of the 2 top quarterbacks.
Yep.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Okay.
Seeing West Florida getting a chance to match up with a Ferris or a Grand Valley, I think would be pretty entertaining. I mean, West Florida, what was it, 19, came up to Ferris,
right?
And in a game that I didn't think they were going to win, they won. And Ferris turned over the ball a whole lot of times in that football game, and kind of pissed it down their leg, to be honest.
Yep.
But maybe just for new matchups, West Florida at Grand Valley, that would be that'd be a humdinger.
Well, I've been saying for a while that that's what I think is going to happen in Florence. Good God, I'm old. In McKinney.
Freudian slip.
Yes, exactly. All right. So, now it's time to get the blow torches out. First one was fun. No, let's don't do that one first. I want to do this one first. All right. How does one respect them when a 4-loss team is ranked 10th? Well,
I love the MIAA.
Well, I even just theoretically, it's possible that a 4-loss team is the best team. It's just theoretically possible. Is it realistic in Massey? No. But I don't like getting into any situation where we're just talking about it and treating it like standings. I think that's the wrong way to look at this. All right. Mm-hmm. And maybe somebody else disagrees with me and feel
Brandon,
free.
I'd have a hard time saying a 4-loss team at this point is in the top 10. Just because 10? if they have 4 setbacks, they're not that good at that point.
Yeah.
Well, I think theoretically it could happen. Like I said, I think realistically it's not. But theoretically it could happen. If you put, in a stupid scenario, you put the SEC in Division II, the 4-loss team would still be the 5th best team in Division II.
Sure. I'm looking at it from a D2 context, but right.
I got you. So it's just theoretically possible. So
Matthew did a really good job last week.
Putting the SEC in D2 is not theoretically possible, but
that is correct. So, all right. So let's go. By the way, this is John Dykstra writes for the Maryville newspaper, and I guess they were giving him a hard time about, and of course he's being tongue in cheek here.
Who was giving him a hard time?
The people in the press box. So gotcha. Everyone is telling. He said that Tony and Massey for telling everyone that the MIAA was the SEC of D2. That sentiment kept being brought up in the press box And I'm like, I certainly didn't say that. Okay, so John's a real nice guy. He doesn't want to get the heat. But I'm gonna take this a little further because a friend of mine on the message board who I've known forever was just bragging up the GLIAC yesterday. All right. The GLIAC won 2 games yesterday. There is zero doubt about that. That cannot be disputed. Grand Valley beat a 2-loss Northwest Missouri team that lost to Central Oklahoma badly by 5 points. Okay. Ferris State beat an undefeated Pitt State team by 3 points. That's fine. I think in all year long, we have talked about Ferris State and Grand Valley being 2 of the best teams, if not the 2 best teams in the country. Having said that, those 2 are not the only GLIAC teams. And when I look at the results and I see 48-9 versus Wayne State and 29-7 versus Saginaw Valley and 56-3 versus Northern Michigan, 42-7 against Michigan Tech, 42-14 against Wayne, and then 49-7 against Davenport, I have a hard time seeing the depth of the GLIAC. And what was funny yesterday, before I saw all the bragging about the GLIAC, I saw somebody outside of the GLIAC tell me, I think we need to reassess how good we thought the GLIAC really was. So anyway, Tony, you tell me why I'm wrong. And the GLIAC is absolutely an ass kicker and better than every conference in the country.
I'm not going to tell you that because I've never espoused that. And for John's sake, I guess if I say, I don't. I said that the MIAA was the SEC of D2, but
he's tongue in cheek. He's tongue in cheek with that. He knows you didn't do that.
So. Yeah. All right, good. Hey, look, the MIAA and the GLIAC are absolutely going to always be going at each other for who's got supremacy. And the idea that the GLIAC has to have some sort of position, I don't know. That's an argument I just never get into because I just think it's nonsense. Okay, so yeah, they won a couple of close games yesterday, and there have been times where the MIAA has had the better of it. Does the GLIAC have some depth to it that maybe is a little different than people are giving it credit for? Sure. Who cares?
Let me be clear.
Who cares? The idea that the GLIAC's better, I don't care.
Right. Let me be clear. This was not
see good games and see teams win games.
I'm not
going to get into that argument.
This was not in defense of the MIAA at all because
I know it's not.
I had said earlier I got crap at Pitt State for saying that nobody was elite in the MIAA. They're beating Indy, kicking the crap out of them and saying this is not elite. And I was like, no, it's not.
Yeah, I just look. I mean, the GLIAC has had the better run of it over the last handful of years, and the MIAA had the better run of it for a bunch of years before that.
Right.
It's a cyclical. It's football.
It is 100%.
I mean, I guess it's fun to talk about, but what's the difference? Yeah. And I know I read those same posts that you did.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there reading them, going, "What's the difference?"
Right.
It doesn't matter.
And it's not like either of those teams didn't belong in the field with each other at the end of the day.
Gosh.
Like it's much different than like the week before, coming to the MIAA, rolling the GAC and the GLVC. It's like, okay, there's a difference here.
Exactly.
I didn't see much of a difference based on the MIAA and the GLIAC yesterday, or like the Gulf South. Like there are certain conferences that are all in the same mix. Whoever's the best one that year is really hard to tell because, as Brandon said, do you go by the top-heavy teams or do you go by the depth of the conference? There's so many different ways to twist who has the best conference with that because the MIAA might be deeper but not as top-heavy. So what do you value more? I don't know, kind of as you said there. Yeah. But there were 4 really good teams playing yesterday, and that's what was more important there. They all deserve to be on the field together. I mean, no one really separated themselves yesterday. If anything, the MIAA closed the gap because the GLIAC had gotten the better of them the last few years.
I think the GLIAC deserves credit for winning because that's somewhat important.
That's absolutely true. I'm just talking about the gap.
In any case,
close the gap. I mean. What gap?
I saw a pretty good gap last year between Ferris and Northwest. I saw a pretty good gap.
Yeah, all right, that's fair. But I mean, Ferris was
a monster.
Gap on everybody last year.
Yeah, so, that is absolutely. That was elite. What they were last year was elite.
Yes.
As an impartial third party, I would say that the combination of Ferris and Grand Valley is clearly the two best of any conference.
Yes.
I think 3, 4, 5, 6 of the GLIAC would get thumped by the MIAA's 3, 4, 5, 6. I really do. I think if you took Emporia against Davenport, we know how that goes.
I'd like to see Emporia at Saginaw Valley. Look, I get that Davenport beat Saginaw Valley. I still think Saginaw Valley is better than Davenport.
Agreed. I totally agree.
Right,
So,
but I mean, they
totally
lost
agree.
to them, so it is what it is. But right, so that's kind of how I look at it is that you're going to be measured by conference strength upon how your teams do in the postseason.
For
So the MIAA probably gets cut short of its true depth because if you took a look at that 3, 4, 5, 6, they're going to probably beat any conference in the country.
And
the Gulf South, I think, might be the closest at times to them, but the 1 and 2 in terms of a 1-2 punch right out of the gate, Grand Valley and Ferris are better than anybody in that, no doubt about it.
Totally agree.
And that's part of why. If you're not going to see it on the field, and we're not going to put 64 teams into the bracket, what are we arguing about? Who cares? That's why this whole thing is just so silly to me.
Well, my friend was also on a Michigan beating Ohio State high.
Yeah.
So he was feeling himself yesterday.
One of your comments was particularly
yes,
poignant and astute, I will say.
Gotcha. Love that dude though. Anyway, he's been around forever. He is. So, all right, guys. That that's going to do it for this week. This has been fun. It is time to go. Everybody have a good week. We will see you here next week, same time, same place, and we'll be down to 4 teams after next Saturday. But until then, appreciate you all. Thank you very much for watching Inside D2 Football.